Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Ideaca's webinar on finding the ROI in mobility for professional services firms. We will have a question and answer period at the end of the presentation, and while everyone in the audience has been muted to avoid background noise, please feel free to type in any questions into the online chat window, and we will try to make sure that we get to them before the 1 o'clock deadline. As I mentioned before the presentation began, today's Twitter hashtag is ROI Mobility, and our username is @Ideaca. Feel free to tweet at us, as we'd love to get some feedback on today's webinar, stimulate some discussion around the topic of mobility ROI, and field any questions that you may have. So by way of introduction, my name is Brett Scriven, and I'm a business development manager here at Ideaca, and I've been here for close to 2 years now. I'm responsible for national marketing and sales efforts for both professional services and our cloud computing business. Now I'll let Brad introduce himself.
Good afternoon. My name is Brad Blaskovich, and I'm a Director of Solutions Consulting with Ideaca. And my role here is to help clients understand how to use technology and improve process and leverage those investments. I've been in this space for about 15 years and done a number of large projects around ERP and mobility.
Perfect. So a brief introduction, here's a brief agenda for today's webinar. I'll give a brief overview of Ideaca and then turn it over to Brad very quickly for the bulk of the presentation, where he'll dive into mobility, typical investments for a mobile strategy, benefits, and 12 cases of ROI for professional services. And a brief introduction to Ideaca. We ourselves are a professional services firm. We've been in business for over 10 years and have over 350 clients. We have roughly 200 staff across our 5 Canadian offices in Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Kitchener, and Toronto. And we're both a Microsoft Gold certified partner as well as an SAP partner. There are 3 major areas that we do focus on as a business. So first, we focus on advisory services, which can be broken down into building business cases, benefits realization, process design, and system selection. We have an implementation services arm, which consists of ERP, CRM, business intelligence, custom development, portals and collaboration, and cloud computing. And lastly, we do have a support services arm of the business to assist clients once they have gone live with application support. We do have a lot of experience in the professional services space and have worked with a wide variety of clients in various industries, including engineering, construction, IT services, publishing, legal, accounting, and software development. Here you can see a sampling of some of our clients, and there are a few core areas that we help our professional services customers with. The first being CRM initiatives in terms of improving sales and business development through sales and marketing automation across all of these industries. We do significant work around professional services automation, so looking at time entry, billing, resource management, and financial management. And we have done work around business intelligence and professional services dashboards, so looking at the health of projects over the overall business. And lastly, we have done significant work in the knowledge management area, building both portals and collaboration. Now I'll pass it over to Brad just to begin his deep dive into the topic of mobility in professional services. Take it away.
Thanks, Brett. So thanks for coming, and this afternoon we're going to talk about mobility. And first of all, it's an exciting time in this space. The interesting piece is that a lot of organizations struggle to figure out what makes sense, and hopefully by the end of today's presentation you'll not only know some areas that you might be able to leverage mobility, but also some of the costs and investments to get there. So the deployment of line of business applications in large enterprise is happening very quickly. And the statistics say about 70 to 80% of organizations have essentially deployed some type of mobile. Now, don't get all depressed because you're looking internally and going, we haven't done anything. Most of those, about 80%, have actually been nothing more than taking CRM and deploying it in a mobile sense. So today we are not going to really focus on taking CRM and making it mobile. We're going to focus on a number of different areas beyond CRM and how you might be able to leverage mobility and see an ROI in your organization. So we'll look across things such as service, outside sales, marketing, and other areas. The other thing that's worth noting is that mobility can be very different to each organization based on the size of the organization, the type of organization, and also their technology maturity level. So some organizations will be able to do things quicker, faster because of where they are in the maturity, but that shouldn't prevent any organization from looking at mobility and figuring out how it will produce benefits and realize some ROI in their organization. Again, as I said, it's exciting times with some of the deployments of new devices that we've seen come across, a new generation of tablets, and the wide variety of smartphones that are now on the market that only a few short years ago we couldn't even think of doing some of the things we are able to do today. So just a little bit about mobility in the various areas where we have mobile workers. What we're going to focus on today isn't going to be so much the area of the home-based mobile worker, although there are some variants where they might be able to take advantage of more mobile apps beyond just working from a home office. We're really going to focus on what we call the non-office-based mobile workers and the office-based mobile workers that might have a need for mobility within a defined environment. So there's a couple of subcategories within there. But when we look at this space, there are a lot of statistics, and worldwide, it's expected that mobile worker population will increase from about 919 million in 2008, that it'll reach about 1.2 billion in 2013. So that's significant growth. The U.S. by far has the highest percentage of mobile workers in its workforce, with about 75%. By 2013 is the expected target, and that's about a 3.3% growth over where they are today. Now, those statistics are U.S.-based, but Canada tends to exhibit the same patterns as the U.S. market when it comes to mobility and other technology. Just a little bit more detail around growth in the mobile space. So you can see, 2012, 2013, expected just under 6% growth in each of those years, at a time when the total workforce is actually shrinking by most standards. We are seeing substantial growth in mobility. When we look at mobile application adoption, there was a survey done, looked at 1,300 executives, and in terms of their priorities, mobile app development was identified as one of their top priorities for IT spend for 2012. Keeping in mind that deploying solutions for mobile is not simply taking existing line of business applications and web enabling them or extending them, users expect mobile applications to work very differently than desktop apps. So some organizations would say, oh, but we deployed Citrix, and now our sales or marketing people can access our line of business applications from a laptop. There's some truth to that, allowing some mobility, but what we're really talking about is very user task-specific functionality that your employees can produce results from more mobile devices. So out of the survey, as you can see, 41% were likely to spend IT budget in the next 12 months around mobile applications. And there's a large percentage that are currently evaluating or starting to implement. So what are some of the investments an organization can expect to make to look at mobile technology? There's about 5 main categories. Obviously, there's the application wireless software. So what are the initial costs to purchase or customize the application to run in a mobile environment? Things like annual licensing costs come into that. And you'll be surprised, that's only about 5% of annual costs that organizations incur. There's obviously some infrastructure requirements, server hardware, and this includes, cost of a dedicated server to extend and run the mobile application. That's approximately less than 1% of annual costs. And then obviously there are the mobile devices themselves. And again, exciting times with a wide variety of platforms and devices available on the market, whether it's a BlackBerry, an iPhone, some of the new products from Samsung, or getting into the new generation tablets, the iPads, And again, the tab from Samsung is another great example, or even the BlackBerry Playbook. These start to produce about 22% of the annual costs. And of course, there are a wide variety of strategies to try and reduce costs in these areas. So, for example, in the mobile space, you might be able to get the upfront devices for free if you're looking at using a smartphone to provide the mobility app. You can typically get a device, at least in Canada, if you are willing to sign a 2 or 3 year contract. Now, for higher-end devices, if you're looking at deploying large tablets, you might consider even leasing or doing monthly rentals. The other thing to keep in mind around the devices themselves are that the lifespan of a mobile device is typically much shorter than a traditional laptop or other piece of hardware. Smartphones, for example, we would recommend using 18 months as a traditional lifespan. The new generation tablets, you might be able to stretch to 24 months. Some of this is just the general abuse and wear and tear that a typical device will take out in a mobile world that they may not take in a traditional office environment, whether that's bouncing off a car seat, falling out of a pocket, or just dropping in its use. Server hardware, you might be able to look at options such as cloud computing as an alternative to purchasing dedicated infrastructure in-house. This also might provide you more scalability and redundancy that you could otherwise maybe not take on in your budget. Even for the application software and services themselves, there are licensing models that you might be able to take advantage of, depending upon the vendor of choice. And looking at things such as software as a service or SPLA versus the traditional perpetual software licensing model where you buy 100 seats up front and pay annual licensing support costs. Now more than ever, there are more solutions out there that provide access to the app in any of these licensing models. Some of the additional investments, IT labor. This includes the cost to deploy the initial solution, the annual support and maintenance, as well as any upfront third-party consulting to supplement internal labor. And you can see this is about 27% of annual costs. Training, obviously, you need to train the users as well as internal IT training for the people who need to support the application and the devices. And those typically come in at about 4% of annual costs. Now, the largest cost in most mobile deployments is the actual wireless services from the carriers themselves, your data and voice plans, and those account for about 42%. A couple of points. When you're looking at training, these costs can fluctuate slightly based on your organization and your industry. Take a good look at your workforce. Your requirements for training might be slightly higher than average, depending on the demographic of your workforce. One organization we worked with in the healthcare field, their average workforce age was about 52. So we had workers that traditionally hadn't grown up with technology. We weren't just training on the application themselves, but also on the whole mobility devices. So that increased some of the training costs. Wireless service, there are some strategies that you may be able to control costs here as well. Depending upon, again, your industry and your environment and what your mobile strategy looks like, you might be able to deploy a smartphone or tablet with data only versus having to supply data and voice service from the carrier. Take a look at corporate liability versus employee liability in terms of the plans that you come up with for your corporate mobility strategy. For example, you may just decide that every employee has to sign up with a carrier that you've negotiated with, but that they get the bill personally, you provide an allowance to a maximum, and that's the extent of your liability. Some organizations will go with corporate liability. They get the invoice for all of the phones on their corporate plan. They pay it, they're accountable for it, and then they try to go back to employees for overages or unauthorized use. That in itself can be quite an administrative task. Another piece under wireless, you might want to look at how you can integrate your mobility device with internal voice systems. So take a look at what you use in-house for your corporate voice system or telephone system, traditionally known as a PBX. If you're already deploying a VoIP strategy, you might be able to integrate these devices and leverage that and save some long distance and airtime costs. There's some great solutions from Cisco and Mitel that do a very good job of integrating with a mobility strategy. Another piece is to even look at using Wi-Fi within confined spaces. It might be cheaper and less expensive to make a Wi-Fi investment, for example, in a an area where you have mobile workers across a set geographic boundary. And I have an example on that. We were doing some work with someone who services rail cars, so they have a large piece of property, mobile workers within that property, and rather than use a carrier data service, it was cheaper for them to set up a Wi-Fi. So here's just a summary slide on what those mobile investment costs look like. And again, the wireless carrier cost is by far your biggest investment. And there are strategies to reduce that depending upon your industry. So now you have the cost, you get an idea of what that looks like, where the investments need to be made. So why would you do it? What are the benefits? And we're going to try and focus some real-life examples around these 5 key areas. So user productivity, increased revenue and customer profitability, IT staff productivity, business operations costs, and IT operations costs. So we're kind of splitting out operational costs to show where you might see it on the business side versus IT operations. Here are some of the adoption drivers. Why do organizations take on these projects? Because they expect 47% of the time to see some operational efficiency. So they think if they layer on mobility, that they can be more efficient. 44% believe that it will provide a competitive advantage. 40% because they think they can make better decisions, quicker decisions. The interesting one is 34% do it because employees are demanding it. And I think this can be a little bit of a misnomer depending upon the reasons behind it. If you're going from in an organization that has a very young workforce coming on board, who has been around for a number of years, have not necessarily made a lot of technology investment, I could see why you might have employees demanding it. The other piece to keep in mind is that any technology investment, and mobile apps included, will only provide a competitive differentiation or advantage if the organization is an early adopter. Otherwise, the organization ends up playing catch-up and becomes a me too to keep up with their competitors and to keep costs in line, to reduce costs the same way their competitors already have. And again, back to employees demanding it, I think it does reflect a bit on changing demographics of the workforce. And it can also play a part in attracting and retaining key talent. It also facilitates work-life balance, and it can also help employees feel more empowered to do their work within a structure that allows them to feel like they are meeting all these commitments, family, and being a more effective employee.